Have you ever felt limited by traditional watercolor techniques? In today's video, I'll show you how to add a whole new level of expression to your art. Together, we'll transform an ordinary village scene into a vibrant work of art, using an expanded perspective, dynamic masking fluid techniques, and bold brushstrokes to bring everything to life. By the end of this video, you'll have all the tools you need to make any scene uniquely yours. Let's get started. Welcome back. I'm Graham, an artist based in the UK, and today I'll take you through my process for creating a dynamic contemporary watercolour of the beautiful village of Ensham where I live. Together we'll explore the composition and key elements that capture my attention. As we paint, I'll show you 3 techniques to bring your own scenes to life. Expanding perspective to give your work more depth, using masking fluid to build structure and movement, and adding bold and expressive brushstrokes to make your composition and colours pop. Let's dive in and start transforming this village into a vibrant work of art. It's autumn and the colours are stunning. Rich oranges in the leaves contrasting with the cooler blues in the shadows. As the light starts to shift and the days get shorter, the scene feels like it's changing every moment. I want to capture that contrast, the warmth of the autumn leaves and the coolness of the long shadows. The square is the heart of the village, so it feels like a natural place to start. But I don't just want a straightforward view. I want to twist the perspective, to see things from multiple angles. I'm not staying in one place, I want to capture as many elements as possible. Looking around, I can see multiple potential views, side streets, gaps between buildings. Look at things from as many angles as possible. I'm drawn to this red brick building. Along with the trees and fallen leaves, it's going to help me balance the composition and give everything a sense of unity. Now I'm moving on to sketching, starting with a very rough drawing on the iPad. I'm bringing together all the different photographs and perspectives we looked at earlier. It's a loose, exploratory sketch, just blocking in the major shapes and working out the general flow of the piece. The idea at this stage is to focus on the motion lines, the big picture, not get bogged down by the details. Once I've got that in place, I'll add some rough colours. I'm keeping the palette very restricted here. This was inspired by a shot from the Wes Anderson film Moonrise Kingdom. I think that colour scheme with its warm autumnal tones will really suit this watercolour. With that done, I can transfer the sketch onto paper and add more details. The great thing about drawing is I can simplify or eliminate anything that feels like a visual obstruction. Maybe it's a power line or a road sign. Whatever it is, I can remove it from the image, letting the more important parts of the scene breathe. Sometimes I might enhance the plant life, maybe a tree branch or some leaves, just to bring more beauty and life to the composition. It's about emphasising the positive and trimming the negative. If you're struggling, try making thumbnail sketches of various elements of your scene. Don't worry too much about how they're all going to fit together. Look at everything as an individual piece. Just find the elements that catch your eye, work on those, and then pull everything together like a jigsaw. That way, you can build up this kind of expanded perspective. With the drawing established, it's time to move into the masking fluid stage. This part of the process is transitional, taking us from the precision of the drawing phase and into a more fluid, expressive painting stage. We're masking off a lot of the lines we've drawn, but we can afford to be looser with some areas, especially when we start to introduce texture and bolder marks. For this piece, I'm using a Winsor & Newton masking fluid and a selection of tools to apply it. A table knife is great for creating straight lines, and even though a cheap Chinese brush has been ruined by the masking fluid, it still leaves wonderful, unpredictable marks. An old toothbrush is excellent for splatter effects, both for the masking fluid and for adding texture to the painting later on. Masking fluid isn't just for fine details, it's a tool that can add drama and motion to the composition. These marks help establish the energy of the piece before we've even added any colour. It's like sculpting the space, creating contrast, depth and movement. The bolder you are with the masking fluid, the better. Don't be afraid to really slosh it on. A bold splash of masking fluid can be as expressive as any brushstroke, adding texture and intensity that will really come alive once the colour is applied. Now we're into the painting phase. I've selected a range of colours that I can mix my palette from. After testing a few options, I've narrowed it down to my final selection. I'm going to use at least 3 brush sizes, plus a toothbrush for some splatter effects. To start, I'm blocking in the colours very loosely, starting with bright yellow ochre for the warm tones, and then moving on to a mix of indigo and azure blue for the sky and cool shadows. At this stage, I'm not worried about the details. I'm just laying down broad brush strokes, really sloshing it on to establish the basic colours and composition. Once those first layers have dried, I go back in with slightly thicker paint and darker tones to add more depth. I start stippling the paint in and using water to soften and blend it. I want to keep it loose, but I'm slowly building the 3-dimensionality of the piece, working across the paper to develop the shadow areas and create some variation in the colours. Each new layer of colour builds on the previous one, and that's what gives the painting its depth and richness. I'm glazing the layers on, gradually building up the colours, which creates a much more interesting tone than if I just painted one solid block of colour. As I progress, I'm starting to bring in more expressive brush strokes, echoing the dynamic lines from the masking fluid. I want to create movement, especially in the road area, using bold, dramatic strokes that draw the eye into the piece. Sometimes, if I've gone too far, I'll rub some of the paint back with a paper towel, but it's important to keep the energy of the strokes alive. The layering of blues over browns gives some lovely shading and depth, and the splatter from the toothbrush adds texture and brings everything together. This can soften any overly harsh areas and balance the overall tones. It's all about creating harmony across the painting, and the toothbrush splatter is a great way to unify everything, pulling the composition together. Now that the paint is dried, it's time to remove the masking fluid. This is always the most exciting part, as we finally get to see how things have turned out. These dramatic white lines at the bottom are really helping to create that sense of movement in the painting. Along with the whites in the sky, the foreground and the details in the building, they really help to connect all the different elements of the scene. When removing the masking fluid, we need to be careful not to go too aggressively, especially since we applied it pretty thickly. Rubbing too hard can risk tearing the paper, so I'm being very gentle as I peel it off. I'm using a putty rubber, which works really well, but sometimes I'll also just use my fingers. Just a note here, using your fingers can sometimes smudge the paint, so I prefer using the putty rubber because it can help avoid that. It's all about precision here. We want to reveal the texture without damaging the underlying work. This really is the best part of the process, because the masking fluid lines are adding so much dynamic energy to the piece. If any of the whites feel too stark, that's not a problem. I can always soften them with a wash or some additional brushwork. Nothing is final. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. Experiment all you can. With the marks under the masking fluid revealed, I'm adding some extra autumn leaves, using slightly abstracted shapes to capture that feeling of leaves having fallen. As with the trees, I'm not focusing on drawing them accurately, but on creating a sensation of autumn in motion. And here is the finished piece. Adding those leaves at the bottom has really helped to bring the flow of the autumn leaves together. By using an expanded perspective, bold masking fluid techniques and dynamic brushstrokes, I've aimed to push this scene beyond a traditional landscape and give it something more unique and contemporary. The goal was to create a painting that feels vibrant and charged with energy, bringing Encham to life in a way that's fresh, expressive and full of movement. I hope you've enjoyed this journey through painting Encham. If you did, please click like, subscribe and all the other fun stuff. I'd love to hear your comments on this piece and any subjects you might like to see in future arty videos. Thanks for your time and enjoy your art journey.